Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is Nicole, and today I'm going to be sharing with you the books that I hope to read between now, which I guess is going to be coming up on August, to the end of this year, and more specifically, the new releases that I plan on reading. Now, this is a change for me. I tend to read a lot of backlisted books and a lot of classics, but I am participating in the hardest reading challenge you'll ever do 2.0, and one of the prompts for that reading challenge, which is a year-long reading challenge, is that every month for that year, you read a new release book. So, kind of supporting authors that are just coming out, that kind of thing. So, I thought it would be fun to share what I plan on reading in case you're looking for some new releases or in case you're participating in this reading challenge as well. And just want to hear about some books that you could be considering reading or getting from your library either now or in the future. So to do this, I'm going to share my screen. I'm looking all of these up on the story graph, and I'm going to be reading from the story graph what it says the books are about and, crossing our fingers that it's accurate. So the first book that I'm going to be talking about is We Computers. This is by Hamid Asmalov, I believe is how you pronounced his last name. And I'm going to be looking over to the side just because that is where my computer screen is. Let's talk about what We Computers is about. So I'm going to share two things. One is part of the description that is listed on the story graph, though I will put the entire description up on your screen. And then the story graph also does this wonderful thing where they share what's called a preview of the book, which is sort of an AI generated synopsis of like the themes that you expect to find in the book. And I'll also probably be sharing as we go along why I'm interested in reading these books. So let's get going. I have books for August through December, with the exception of November. I couldn't find a book for that month. Anyway, back to We Computers. Okay, so We Computers is described as a multi-layered exploration of poetry, authorship, and digital intelligence by a writer of immense poetic power. It takes place in the 1980s, where a French poet and psychologist finds himself in possession of one of the most promising inventions of the century, a computer. Enchanted by snippets of Persian poetry, he learns from his Uzbek translator partner, Abdul Hamid Ismail. John Persay builds a computer program capable of both analyzing and generating literature. But beyond the text on his screen, there are entire worlds of history, philosophy, and maybe even of love in the stories and people he and AI conjure. And it goes on from there, but I'll now just share what the Storygraph preview says. This book is ideal for readers who enjoy intellectually rich, genre-blending narratives that explore the intersection of human creativity, cultural history, and artificial intelligence through a poetic lens, which I think is such a fascinating combination of things. I like that this book is set in the past at the onset of computers, but it is dealing with a very relevant and current issue, which is the use of AI and using AI to create art and specifically literature. I also love that this is a translated work. The author himself, I believe, is from Uzbekistan. I'm not sure if the book is set in Uzbekistan, but the author in the book is certainly working with an Uzbek translator. So I'm assuming that the author in the book is from Uzbekistan. So I feel like there's a bit of metafiction going on in the process here. And I have some really high hopes. I even love the cover of this book. Like the guy with his head in the computer that looks like a face on a computer screen holding a book of what I'm assuming is Persian poetry. Yeah, sign me up. Okay, book two that I have that I'm looking forward to in August and maybe a backup. I'm trying to have a few backups in case I can't find certain books, is The Forbidden Experiment, the story of the wild boy of Averon. Now, this book was originally published in 1994, but my understanding is it's gone out of print, but New York Review Books is bringing it back into print. And so for my purposes, that's going to count as a new release because there's no other way to get a hold of this book, as far as I know. But this is a work of nonfiction, which is a bit atypical of me, and it's a cross between like historical, psychology, and biography, and let me share with you what it's about. The true story of the 19th century so-called wild boy of Averon, an abandoned French child who lived for years alone in the wilderness before being brought under the care of an innovative young physician, which partially reminds me of a couple of movies that came out in the 80s or 90s. I don't know if any of them are based off of this book. I might have to look that up at some point. But it begins with a young boy who has been abandoned by his caretakers and has been living in the wild for quite a while. And he's captured while scavenging for food from a local garden, sent to the National Institute for the Deaf in Paris and declared a hopeless case. He was left to run wild until one day a medical student arrived on the scene. And I won't go on because I feel like the rest of the description does get into spoilers, so I'll just stop there. But basically, Jean Ettard is the young person who comes, who I believe is studying psychology, and he starts using some techniques to try and help this boy to communicate and figure out what's going on with him and start getting him to the point where he can start to learn. He involves just one caretaker in his process, and the story goes on from there. The preview says that this is a haunting true story of a feral child. I don't know about some of the terms that are used to describe this. I feel like there are probably better, more modern terms that could be describing the situation going on here, but I'm just going to read to you what it says. Take AI and the description with a grain of salt. But a true story of a feral child and the doctor's attempts to civilize him is ideal for readers deeply fascinated by the murky boundaries between human nature and nurture explored through historical tragedy. I think some of the tragedy here is just the terms that are being used for this child who was abandoned. Like, why not refer to him as an abandoned child or someone who hasn't been taken care of? Like, he's clearly a neglected child who is trying to cope with the trauma he's experienced by being neglected. Anyway, so this is clearly one that I'm a little less sure of, but I'm still interested in the psychology around it. And I trust that New York Review book, despite the description that is here, will be rather conscious of how they put this work out. That said, like I mentioned, it was originally published in 1994, so it will have a lot of the terminologies and thoughts about psychology and what's going on with this child that were prevalent in the 90s will be used in this book. That was a really complicated way of saying that. There are 6 different books in the month of September that I am rather curious about, so let me share those with you. The first one I'm going to talk about is Zone Rouge. This is a work of literary fiction that I feel like combines a couple of other interesting genres like climate fiction into it. So let's talk about what this one is. So, in this book, Zone Rouge refers to some ruined fields in modern day Verdun, France, where people are cleaning up the artillery and explosives that are still there from World War I. I'd like to do some research to see if this is a real location when I go to read this book, but for now, let's just go with what they have here. One bullet, one bit of shrapnel, one bomb at a time. They work. The work, they say, is not measured in days, months, or years, but in generations. It's taken a century to get this far, and it will take many more centuries to complete. One morning, a routine call to pick up a half-buried artillery shell turns out to be much more than just a single missile. They discover a human skeleton, fully intact, found in his fellow demiurges. Dig deep into poisoned soil to reveal the past is rarely ever distant from the present. And again, I'm not going to go into the last paragraph because I found that sometimes they start to get into what I would consider spoilers. So I don't even want to read it myself, but I will have it on the screen in case you would like to. Okay, so this is ideal for readers seeking literary fiction that uses historical trauma as a lens to explore enduring contemporary anxieties about conflict, memory, and societal burdens. Sounds like a heavy pick, a heavy read, so I don't know if this will be the one that I go with for sure, but it's definitely an interesting choice. All right, I couldn't find one of the books, but one of them is the Book of I. I will put the cover up on the screen if I can find it again, but I could not find it on the story graph. So moving on, I have The Sweet Dove Died. This is, again, another book that is being re-released at this time. I don't know if it's released by a current publisher, but like I said, if there is a classic and it's being re-released, I'm counting it. So this would fall into that category. This book was originally published in 1978. It is a classic that is considered literary and also on the comedic side, which I feel like I love a good lighthearted read in my life. This is described as a darkly comic novel about the sometimes fickle nature of love and relationships. And it goes on to say a chance encounter over a Victorian flower book brings together Humphrey, a widowed antiques dealer, his handsome nephew James, and the lovely but cold Lenora. Although she is considerably older, she develops a fondness for James, all the while knowing that Humphrey has feelings for her. And I'm going to end it there because what else do you need to know other than that there's going to be some sort of love triangle going on? And the preview says this book is ideal for readers who appreciate nuanced explorations of emotional entanglement, yeah, and self deception within the quietly complex lives of literary characters. Yeah. So I feel like even the cover of this book, which I don't think is the cover that is coming out that I'm going to get, but like I see the whole triangle right there. Bring it on, especially if it's funny and not tragic like with Thomas Hardy. I'm here for it. I think September is going to end up being the month of re releases. The next one also falls into that category, and it is Ginster. This is a book that is categorized as having a lot of philosophy and politics in it. And let's get into the description. And it's described as being about when World War I breaks out. A young architect student in Munich does everything in his power to avoid being enlisted in the German military. It's supposed to be very funny. So, again, another lighthearted novel. And the horrors are kept off stage as in a Greek tragedy and merely reported from time to time, which I'm guessing is how they keep the book more lighthearted in feeling. The setting is the German home front, and its anti-hero Ginster spends the war gumming up the German war machine as he maneuvers to stay out of its clutches and save his own skin. And there is supposed to be a deeper struggle that he's also dealing with internally. I am really looking forward to this as I spent quite a bit of time in July reading books that are about World War II, but on the Russian side, oddly enough, or Ukrainian side, so Eastern Europe side of that war. And so it'll be interesting to see a German perspective, but still from a character who is not wanting to take part in this war, and particularly not on the side of Germany. And the preview says this book is ideal for readers who appreciate introspective, satirical narratives that subtly critique societal conformity and the absurdities of war through the lens of a reluctant, daydreaming protagonist. And I'm particularly interested in that word daydreaming. I really am fascinated to see how this personal character who is sort of, it seems like a more lighthearted and slower paced type of personality gets on in a in a war situation. I have been finding recently that that is a context in which I like historical fiction, where the focus in some ways is less on the war that is happening and more on how the characters are handling life and themselves and the self discovery that occurs during the war. Another potential option for the month of September would be Tracker by Alexis Wright. Now, this was first published in 2017, so again, I'm not quite sure how this is coming out now. We'll see. It is a work of nonfiction. It is a biography, and it is a collective memoir, is how it's described. It's a collective memoir of one of Aboriginal Australia's most charismatic leaders and an epic portrait of a period in the life of a country, reminiscent in its scale and intimacy of the work of Nobel Prize winning Russian author Svetlana Alexievich. So, and Alexis Wright, if you're not familiar, is the author of Praiseworthy, and she returns to her nonfiction in her new book, Tracker, a collective memoir of a Aboriginal leader, political thinker, and entrepreneur who died in Darwin in 2015. And it goes on to say, taken from his family as a child and brought up in a mission on Croker Island, Tracker Tilmuth returned home to transform the world of Aboriginal politics. He worked tirelessly for the Aboriginal self-determination, creating opportunities for land use and economic development in his many roles, including director of Central Land Council, which I think is really interesting because those are all issues and topics that come up in Praiseworthy, as far as I know. I still haven't read it, so it'll be interesting to see if I end up picking this book and reading this first and then reading Praiseworthy, but it's definitely one that I want to keep in mind because the topics that are covered are so similar. And the preview describes this as being ideal for readers interested in profound, multi-voiced explorations of Indigenous leadership and resilience within the complex tapestry of Australian history and politics. And finally, and perhaps oddly enough, the book I'm most likely to pick for my new release in September is Muscle Man by Jordan Castro. Harold, a middling literature professor at a liberal arts college, lives in a state of dissatisfaction and fear. His colleagues and students evoke nothing but disgust and disdain. None of them understand strength, power, and spiritual actualization like he does. His university's campus, seemingly picturesque, constantly threatens to reveal something sinister. Over the course of a single afternoon, he wanders the halls, sits in meetings, steals from a student, and goes to the gym, all while reflecting on his professional and existential situation. With every line of Harold's frenetic consciousness, his mundane routine transforms into something more foreboding, culminating in an ingenious twist. Muscle Man is ideal for readers drawn to darkly comedic, introspective narratives that dissect modern masculinity and academic disillusionment through the lens of a protagonist teetering between existential dread and delusional grandeur. This sounds so fascinating given the current climate. I'm not totally clear on what side of the spectrum this is going to fall on, but I kind of like that about it. I also think it's kind of funny that there's like this delusional grandeur that the guy seems to have, Harold, and that on the one hand, he sees himself as this grand, misunderstood character. And yet on the other hand, he's having an existential crisis. My only concern with picking this book is that it definitely seems like it's going to be a stream of consciousness and that it's going to be very heavily centered on one person's own narration of things. And he doesn't seem like he's going to be a likable character. And I have struggled with those two things in the last couple of months. That will definitely come into consideration when I go to pick my books for the month of September. All right, and here is the final new release or re-release again, and this is Friday by Michael Tournier. And I'm sorry, I can't pronounce French names correctly. So I believe actually the first name is actually Michelle. Anyway, Friday is a classic that I have heard about and then forgot about. And when I saw it was being re released, I remembered about it again. This was originally published in 1971. Friday is a retelling of Robinson Crusoe, if you didn't know, and in this story, God-fearing Crusoe sets out to tame and remake the island that he ends up on in light of the civilization that he has left behind, which is pretty much in line with Robinson Crusoe, if you didn't know. But I would say in the original book, it's not as obvious through the narration that that's what he's doing. Alone and against incredible odds, he almost succeeds. Then a mulatto named Friday appears and teaches Robinson that there are, after all, better things in life than civilization, which is a twist on what happens in the book if you're not familiar. The Friday is a character in the original Robinson Crusoe. And this book is ideal for readers who enjoy philosophical explorations of civilization and human nature through the lens of a transformative relationship in an isolated setting. I would also say it's an ideal book for people who like retellings of other books. I am definitely looking forward to this. I definitely think this is going to be the pick for December. And I love the idea of potentially also reading Robinson Crusoe around the same time or just before I read Friday. Okay, that is it. I'm pretty sure that during editing for the books that I want to read but didn't have Storygraph updates for, that I'll just quickly put them up on the screen for you, the months that I plan on reading them in, and a little bit about what they're about. And you will see those ones as well, because I think there were 3 or 4 that I couldn't actually find on Storygraph. So hopefully that'll help you out. I am really excited about all these new releases. I feel like I'm kind of almost in the in crowd. I feel like I'm still not, because there's still a lot of classics and a lot of books that are being re-released here. But it's my hardest reading challenge, and for me, it's already a tough call to buy a new release. These aren't for sure the books that I will definitely be reading. I will still be checking out when I go into the stores to purchase these to see what other books have been new released. So, like, subscribe, do those kinds of things if you want to know about what I actually end up reading, and follow along on this journey. I am excited to see how this goes, to be able to compare at the end of the year what new releases I stuck with, which ones I switched, and how I ended up liking them. So that's it for me today. Let me know if there's any new releases that you know that are coming out that you plan on reading or that you think that I might enjoy. And I'll talk to you next time. Bye.